Just have to remind you, don't you ever let anybody take your power from you. You have the same power that you did before November 5th. And you have the same purpose that you did. And you have the same ability to engage and inspire. So don't ever let anybody or any circumstance take your power from you.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Opinions Varied. That's Opinions with an A. Please like, share, and subscribe. And what in the world was going on with Kamala Harris during that message or speech or whatever you want to call it she sent out to her donors and supporters and everybody else yesterday? What was going on? Something was off. Can't really say. You tell me in the comments what you think was going on. And we're also going to get into a CNN discussion over what went wrong with the Harris campaign. And they're trying to come to grips on this post-mortem autopsy of everything that went wrong. And I still think they really just don't get it. A couple of people are starting to come to grips and maybe realizing what they did wrong, which was pretty much almost everything. But most of them aren't. Let's take a watch, listen. I'll comment along the way. Let's go.
Kamala Harris and Tim Walz urging their supporters to keep up the fight on a call with grassroots organizers yesterday.
I know this is an uncertain time. I'm clear-eyed about that.
You're bloodshot-eyed is what you are. Clear-eyed? Far from it.
I know you're clear-eyed about it. And it feels heavy. And I just have to remind you, don't you ever let anybody take your power from you. You have the same power that you did before November 5th.
This woman is a walking platitude.
3 weeks after losing the election, Harris's team is speaking out for the first time. In a wide-ranging interview with Pod Save America's Dan Pfeiffer, former senior advisor to Barack Obama, 4 senior members of the Harris campaign discussed what they think went wrong. One major hurdle, they say, they only had 107 days, and they say that impacted decisions like the number of interviews she could do. Trump, on the other hand, of course, made it part of his campaign to appear across several popular podcasts.
How many interviews did Kamala Harris actually do? I don't have that number. Somebody have that number? I don't think she did that many. And she had plenty of time. In fact, the shorter the time, the better for her. The more time she had, the worse she got. That was the only chance she ever had, was that it was a quick campaign. That's what I'm saying. They're missing it. She can't run a full campaign. The longer she gets out there and speaks, the worse she gets, and the more people get turned off by her.
One of the things I like about doing a show like this, can you imagine Kamala doing this show?
I could imagine her doing this show.
She'd be laying on the floor.
She was supposed to do it, and she might still do it, and I hope she does.
She's not going to do it.
I will talk.
Trump's right. She's not going to do it. She was never going to do it.
Talk to her like a human being. I would try to have a conversation with her.
If she did this kind of an interview with you, I hope she does, because it would be a mess. She'd be laying on the floor comatose. She'd be saying, call in the medics.
Harris's team addressed
Even she had to kind of laugh at that.
Whether she should have gone on Joe Rogan's podcast and tried to explain why it never happened.
Yeah, there's a lot of intrigue around this, a lot of theories. It's pretty simple. We wanted to do it. We had discussions with Joe Rogan's team. They were great. They wanted us to come on. We wanted to come on. We tried to get a date to make it work, and ultimately we just weren't able to find a date.
Hold on a minute. First of all, Joe Rogan doesn't need to discuss anything with you. You need him. He doesn't need you. Do you understand that? Joe Rogan has the hammer here. You need to accommodate him. He doesn't need you. He doesn't need Kamala Harris to come on his program to make his program a success. He doesn't even need Donald Trump. Joe Rogan is the most popular podcaster in the world, and it's not even close. God, these people, they're just not in reality.
But it, didn't ultimately impact the outcome one way or the other.
Are you kidding? Well, maybe it didn't, but we'll never know. And I'm telling you, I think they're lying. They didn't want her within a country mile of Joe Rogan, because if she went on that show, like I said, the more she would have been able to freewheel and open her mouth and talk, the worse it would have gotten. They didn't want her within a country mile of that podcast.
They say they just couldn't find a date there, and that they don't think it would have impacted the outcome one way or the other. James Carville weighed in on this question in recent days. Let's watch what he had to say.
The vice president was thinking about going on Joe Rogan's show, and a lot of the younger progressive staffers pitched a hissy fit. if I were running a 2028 campaign and I had some little snot-nosed 23-year-old saying, I'm going to resign if you don't do this, not only would I fire that on the spot, I would find out who hired them and fire that person on the spot. I'm really not interested in your uninformed, stupid opinion as to whether you go on Joe Rogan or not.
Listen, he's got severe TDS, but he's 100% right. I'm not listening to some 23-year-old tell me I'm supposed to be the one running the campaign. I got to somebody. I'm going to be upset if she goes on Joe Rogan. Before the words you finish saying Joe Rogan, you're gone. You're out the door. He's absolutely right.
Okay, so Jaime, you have the unfortunate position as being for the person who has to explain and answer for all of this for us today. What did go wrong?
Yeah. Look,
What didn't go wrong? Why don't you start there?
I hate these postmortems.
Be a lot quicker conversation.
I'm not going to be talking about this, and this is going to go on for weeks and weeks and weeks. There were a myriad of things that happened over the course of the last 4 years and even 8 years that led to what happened on November 5th. Look, two things that stand out to me. I think my friends on the Kamala campaign are correct. 107 days is not enough time to run for president.
See what I mean? He doesn't get it. 107 days was probably about 40 days too many. Because after the sugar high of her being the new nominee and this whole brat summer and vibes crap went away when she actually had to start answering some questions, she never really got pressed. I'm sorry, she never got pressed hard ever, and she still couldn't handle it. And so this whole he doesn't get it. They still don't get it. She's the worst candidate in the history of the country.
It's just a fact. And on the other side, Donald Trump has now run 3 times. This is the 3rd Democratic nominee that he's run against. And so Donald Trump has run for president 3 times. And so he's been able to seed his messaging a lot more strongly than any of our candidates have been because we've switched over each of the 3 times. And so I do believe that Vice President Harris ran a tremendous campaign. And I think she was as good of a candidate as she could have been. Now, granted, let's pull back to the
She ran an awful campaign. The worst campaign with the worst candidate in the history of the country. That's how this is going to be judged in history. And not too distant history. It's going to be pretty soon where people are going to outwardly start saying that.
layers a little bit. Should she have done Joe Rogan? Yes, she should have. Would it have changed the election? Probably not. And so I think, and look, I'm going to still something that
No, it would have changed the election. Trump would have won 49 states.
Mike and I were talking about in Mario during the green room. I think here's the overarching thing. You've got to meet voters where they are. You can't try to lead them to where you want them to go. And I think time and time again, Democrats, and particularly this past campaign, we were trying to lead a high-minded campaign and talk about issues that we thought were important to people, but come to find out, that's not what people wanted to talk about. People wanted to...
I want to know what he's talking about right there. Okay, if you're going with, I know where he's going there, and I can't say the word on this platform. It's the deletion of the, unborn. And here's what I think. Bear with me for a second. The midterms, I think that definitely had an effect in 2022. But since 2022, it's been a couple of years now, obviously. And I think a lot of women, especially women who were, upset by that ruling by the Supreme Court, I think a lot of them realized, for me to die on that hill as a single issue voter, when I have so many other problems right now, I can't afford eggs and butter for my kids. My kids haven't been able to eat bacon at breakfast for 4 years now. And he said, first of all, it's not going to affect me, most likely ever in my life. Number two, they realize that it's being a states' rights issue really isn't that bad of a thing. There's been referendums all over the country in several states, and even in conservative states, Ohio, for example, a baby deletion law, pretty liberal one, was voted in by the people. So I think that lost its luster. The whole that they put all their eggs in that basket was a huge blunder, and once again they did not have their finger on the pulse of the electorate, and it cost them dearly. And I could go on more about that, but those are the two things that come to the top of my mind right now about why I don't think it was such a driving issue this time. I think that day is done. I think Trump once again was right. He said, I think people are going to like the way it is this way. And most normal people do like that it is this way now, where your state has the final say on that. And that's how constitutionally correct End of story.
Talk about immigration. They wanted to feel safe. They want to talk about inflation. And look, all these numbers that
how did you not know that
we're talking about today seem to be doing better right now. And I think if we had a couple more days or weeks, I do believe Kamala Harris and Joe Biden could have got that message out a little bit more saliently. And then, of course, Governor Walz did a great job too.
And Governor Walz did a great job too. Bro, does this guy believe what he's saying? Or is he just saying it because he has to? He can't actually believe that. The worst candidate with the worst vice presidential candidate with the worst campaign in American history.
Just to Haima's point, I mean, there's a couple of things, right? We talked about immigration earlier in this segment. We saw Governor Abbott. He was arguably the unsung hero of this political campaign, right, by bringing immigration to the fore. When you look at Donald Trump's, what he's arguing is a mandate for a second term based off of the margin of victory that he had over Vice President Harris. I mean, you look at some of those blue states, that's what's emboldening him. And that's also the warning sign, I think, for the Democrats, right? Because it is immigration. It is inflation. She was quite defensive, as was Biden, when Haima mentioned some of the indicators, right?
I said it in a video, I'll put it up top. I said it in a video the other day about Trump's mandate. I said New Jersey is in play. If Trump comes through on even half of the stuff he's promising, a state like New Jersey is in play for the Republicans in 2028.
President Biden, before Harris assumed the mantle, would just come out and talk about all of these statistics from the Economic Council, excuse me, et cetera. And Americans aren't feeling that when they go to the grocery store and pay for eggs and bread and all of those other things. And Vice President Harris, I think the campaign fell a little bit short of understanding and being able to articulate Americans' pain.
Yeah,
a lot of it short.
Dig in a little bit more on Stephen, in particular. There, of course, we've spent a lot of time on, and it was an ad that was framed around trans issues, right? That the Trump campaign put a lot of money behind, and it was, Kamala Harris is for they, them, Trump is for you. Here was how Quentin Folks, who was on the campaign, as well as David Plouffe, explained that in this postmortem. Let's watch.
Obviously, it was a very effective ad at the end. I ultimately don't believe that it was about the issue of trans. I think that it made her seem out of touch. And it was sort of a pseudo-economic ad underneath it.
At the end of the day, we were spending a lot of time with voters in these battleground states, both quantitatively and quantitatively. And this trans ad was not driving vote.
So he says the ad's not.
I think that drove votes more than the deletion issue did. 100%. Women don't want their daughters to be in locker rooms with biological men. Normal women don't want that, period. End of story. Dads don't want their daughters to be, cross-checked by a male in the field hockey game and possibly having their backs broken. Normal men don't want that. It was a big issue.
Not driving votes, but when you listen to what Quentin said there, I'm sure that they were testing the trans issue in a straightforward way, but if the ad's about way more than that, it doesn't necessarily line up.
Right, and it's amazing how after an election, it's like one or two things that, we lost because of that. But go back to the Virginia governor's race in 2021. The issues in that race were inflation, trans kids in sports,
huge issue,
and immigration, even in Virginia, was an issue. That completely prefigured this election. And I think because the Democrats did better than everyone thought they would in the midterm elections, that people kind of forgot that. But
see where he's not saying what I said before. They did better in the midterms because that deletion issue was hot off the press, and the Democrats pounced on it. And it's never going to be a winning issue from Republicans. But what Trump did, he made even the dumb Republicans see the light to say, we have to moderate on it, accept it, and dress up the states' rights issues that it's a win. The states' rights issue is a win, and it worked.
And that's why we ended up with the 170-day campaign, by the way.
Right, but I think the election was probably lost 3 years ago when the White House was saying inflation was transitory when everyone knew it wasn't, and they were saying there wasn't a border crisis when there was.
Do you agree?
It's simple.
Oh yeah, I agree. I also think there were parental issues in that gubernatorial race in 2021. I mean, it was let me put it to you that
parents want to have say over their children's school, period. Right. Another issue that they just don't get, and let them keep not getting it.
There's so many places I could go with this, but let me just put it in this context. When you have the they them was the important line in that ad. It had less to do with the transgender issue and more with the they them, the wokeness. When you juxtapose Vice President Harris and Beyonce against Donald Trump.
Beyonce.
at either McDonald's or wearing an orange vest in a garbage truck. That was the difference in the election. It had everything to do with the economy, but it also had to do with who is speaking directly to the voters. And you had Donald Trump doing what Democrats have done for decades, speaking directly to working class voters. And the Harris campaign either ignored them, didn't think they needed them. I don't know what their idea was there, but they made a vibe election bet. He made a base election, unvoted, low propensity voter bet. And he won.
So there you go. I think, those last two guys were pretty on it. And Trump also made himself likable. Even to those who like the younger generation, they like him now. They think he's cool now. Going on the podcast. And his son Barron, I think, had a lot to do with that. I said, hey, Dad, you got to go on these guys. Theo Von, Joe Rogan, a few others, Jake Paul. He's like, you got to go on these guys. These guys are great. They have so many people that listen to them, and they're really cool guys. And Trump said, all right. And he did. And it was a home run. Because he can handle that type of banter back and forth. Because he's a regular person. He's a billionaire, but he's a regular person. He's a guy that, would shoot the breeze with the guys at the construction site his whole life. So he could do it. It's natural to him. She could never do it. Never. So she's an awful candidate. Terrible. I said, the longer it went, the worse it got for her. If this would have been a regular campaign, she never would have made it. When she tried the first time, she didn't make it to Iowa in 2020. She's not a president. She's unelectable as a national candidate at this point. Unelectable. So I just don't understand how they just can't pinpoint it. Just be honest. The truth hurts sometimes, but you got to tell the truth. If you want to do better next time, you have to accept the truth. I don't think they're going to. And they totally misread the 2022 midterms. That was an anomaly. You had that hot off the press issue. They ran with it. It was and Republicans had no clue how to respond to it. Trump finally figured out how to respond to it. I've taken it. It's been he said it's been a divisive issue in this country for 50 years. Now it's been settled, and every state can do what they want. And I can do nothing about it. That's why nobody bought the whole thing. Oh, he's going to ban it. It's going to be a ban. And nobody bought it because they know it's not true. The reality, that was gaslighting. It was totally gaslighting. The reality is he can't ban it. He doesn't have the jurisdiction and the authority to ban it. He can't. The Supreme Court would strike that down 9-0. Can't. He has no authority to do so. That's what that means. So nobody bought it. I mean, there's so many things. Like that guy said, you could go on and on. There's so much here. You could dissect this for days. And like I said, they'd be better off talking about what went right with her campaign instead of what went wrong, because it's a lot shorter conversation. It's probably about a couple of minutes at the most. Because I don't know, did anything really go right with that campaign? Yeah, in the beginning, they played off the vibe, and she's not Joe Biden. That was basically what the boost she got. She wasn't Biden. You could have put you probably could have put Bernie up from Weekend at Bernie's and walked him around, and he would have got like great approval right off the bat, because it just wasn't Biden. Biden was just, done at that point. It was over, and the media helped that happen, and so did a lot of Democrats. But they did this to themselves. No one else to blame but themselves, and I'm not going to lose a minute of sleep over it. In fact, I'm sleeping very well now, knowing that January 20th, Donald Trump will be the 47th president of the United States. Let's see what he has to say. What has he got?
I have a running war with the media. They are among the most dishonest human beings on earth.
That's pretty true. One more?
I don't frankly have time for total political correctness, and this country doesn't have time either.
Well, there you go. Those are pretty relevant to what we just saw, right? Listen, that thing's totally random. I have no idea what he's going to say. There's probably about 15, 20 sayings on there, and I hit the button, and he says what he says. So that's it for now. Please like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate you watching. Continue to follow me at Opinions Vary.